Last night, my neighbor came down here and asked me if I needed a some supplies, some household supplies, as they are getting ready to move out, and they're going to do that, I think, next month after she graduates, and all in that space. But that being said, I definitely accepted that much needed household supply. What it was is really none of anybody's business and everything, but it was something that was needed by everybody, usually at least once or twice during the day, and all in that space. And then I started thinking about folks that are, it used to be the stereotype of going to your neighbors to get milk or get sugar. I actually asked for some sodas. Did have one that they were able to give me, and all in that way. And that was really great. But I wonder how many of us know our neighbors or are actually able to even have conversations with them, and all in that space. The reason I'm asking this is because I'm wondering, and I'm going to ask Dan when I bring him on as well, if we're becoming less of a civil society. I just described some things that were very civil that were done by my upstairs neighbors. I've actually got folks outside right now that are doing some painting of the complex, and all in that way. So the apartment is trying to do that beautifying thing, and all in that kind of space. So that is a wonderful thing. But then I turn on the news and I hear about people that are going to the wrong houses, and they're going to pick up their family members, and they get shot. And what happens? I look in the news today, and there are two more incidences that are very much similar to that are being reported. One that was over the weekend that involved a 20-year-old woman who went to the wrong address. Apparently, that was something that was common in upstate New York. And if Lee comes by, he can tell me if that is something that goes on in his part of New York. But apparently, when Kaylin Gillis and her friends took a wrong turn into an upstate New York driveway last weekend, they couldn't have known that the property was owned by a man who, according to a neighbor, had grown increasingly bitter over the years at people driving onto his land by mistake. This time, the error proved fatal. The Hebron landowner, Kevin Monahan, opened fire Saturday night, killing 20-year-old Gillis as she and her friends drove away after turning around in the long dirt driveway, according to Washington County Sheriff Jeffrey Murphy. And like I said, this was an incident that involved that 20-year-old person. Monahan, 65, was arrested on a second-degree murder charge and remains detained pending a bond hearing. One of his neighbors, Andrew Matthews, who runs an auto repair shop in nearby Salem, said Monahan had become more and more upset in recent years at people making wrong turns into his driveway. And definitely that is one of the incidents that I was thinking about as I was looking at the news. And then I turned around and saw that a man in Texas had been involved in an incident in a shooting of two Texas cheerleaders after one mistakenly got into the wrong car. And I actually remember going to a wrong car one time as well. I actually was near a food area, and I let the folks know that I was not trying to do any harm. And I did see that the other car was nearby, and it actually did not look that much different from the car that I mistakenly went to. Fortunately, nothing happened in that incident, and that was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, except for folks giving me that kind of like cold stare and all of that space. And I'm just glad that they didn't have any weapons in their car. Unfortunately, my friend did yell out to me that he was nearby and all in that space, and we just got out of there as quickly as possible. But a man was arrested after two Texas cheerleaders were shot, one critically after one of them mistakenly got into the wrong vehicle, according to the police and the owner of the gym where they trained. So officers in Elgin, about 25 miles northeast of Austin, responded to reports of shots fired outside an HEB supermarket around 12:15 a.m. local time on Tuesday. So that would have been on yesterday. And information suggests that an altercation occurred in the parking lot, and that is another incident of somebody that was a little bit on the quick to shoot kind of a way. So the suspect, Pedro Tello Rodriguez, 25, has been charged with deadly conduct, a third degree felony, according to police over there in that area. So, like I said, I'm going to bring in some of my guests. I do have Donald David Lewis, who's going to come on and share some of his wisdom as well and all in that space. I'll be bringing him on in a minute. I did ask him to come on and talk about some of the things that are going on in the financial lane because I know he is a supporter of fiscal literacy and all in that space. But we're going to get up to him. But I'm going to bring in my good friends, Dan Worthington and Lee Newton Rhodes, because I was wondering if they had thoughts about this. Because, like I said, I was glad to have that conversation with my neighbors and everything, and they definitely supplied some things that I needed in the household. But I was wondering if we have gotten away from that cause of civility that used to be something that was very popular in society. And I don't know that it's as popular. A lot of folks got into that kind of own environment during the pandemic and everything. And I wonder how many of us even know our neighbors. I do know that I know a few of my neighbors here on this side of the complex, those on the backside. I can't say that I know them that well, but I do know some of my neighbors in other parts of the apartment as well. So definitely I would say that I probably know about 15 or 20, but there's thousands of people here and everything. So what is y'all thoughts when y'all are hearing these incidences? And I do want to respond in the same context to something that Lee said yesterday, because I did do some research and all in that space. And while not forgiven, because they don't need to be forgiven, and actually we had our own mayor here in Durham make some comments around gun violence and violence in general and things that need to be done in that space, and it definitely needs to be addressed by various cities around the country. I also don't know that we can paint that necessarily as a true definition of what a protest is, because when I think of protest, I think that you're usually going after some sort of mission, whether that's you're upset at your police, you're upset at your wages, or a number of other things. Now, in my reading, it seems like these teens were trying to do a takeover of a park, almost like they were trying to have a party of some sort or another, and it did get out of hand. There is no doubt about that. It got way out of hand and all in that space, but I don't know that it was a quote unquote planned protest unless they were trying to protest the hours of the park, which that might have been the case as well, but it was done through social media. So the initiative to get all these people in the same area was done through social media. So I was just wondering y'all's thoughts around the notion of civility.
Yeah, Mark, let's throw quickly. Whether it's planned or not, I could care less. What I care about is their action. Are they breaking the law? Are they impeding the traffic? Are they looting? Are they burning? Are they assaulting? Are they threatening other people? That's what I care about.
They were arrested for doing exactly that. And but I'm saying, but the way that the media has portrayed it a lot of times is that it was a protest activity. And I don't know that it was a protest activity. I mean, as I told you in emails, I used to be part of the Daybreaker group, and the Daybreaker group literally would take over upstairs major buildings in Miami, in New York, and a number of other places, and do what are considered day dance parties. And some of those, they definitely had security, and I don't know of any incidences, but I can't say that there weren't. I'd have to talk to the organizers. But this was a very popular thing. It became very popular even during the pandemic because they were doing the Zoom variation of it and all.
No, I get all that. But once they go on private property and they're trespassing, that's no longer a protest. That's breaking the law.
It was a park. Is that a private property?
No, so once a park, I don't have a problem with, as long as they're, because my understanding is a lot of these things, what they're doing is they're banging on cars, they're burning cars, they're pulling people out of cars, or threatening people in cars. That to me is not a protest.
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it was intended as a protest. I think it was intended as a way to get the activities for the kids, because a lot of kids are complaining that they don't have activities to do. And I do understand that that park in Chicago was closing early. So if it was a protest, it was in that sense of doing like a unplanned, almost rave-like party. So that's what I meant when I said it was done through social media. So
I'm sorry, I don't understand. I have to ask you, because I don't understand. What do you mean kids don't have anything to do? No, they have school, they have libraries, they have parks, they have parents, they have friends.
Activities after school. That's been something that a lot of people have been complaining about. That their activities are not as active after the school hours and all in that space. So they don't have as much to do. Like when I was going to school, I was a member of, and Nick and Sasha would love to hear this, but yes, I was a member of my church.
Mark, I'll let you talk. I just got one quick question before you go on. If that's true, that kids have nothing to do after school, then we should see the same pattern uniformly throughout the United States. And then we're not seeing that. Am I wrong?
No, that's what I'm telling you. There are incidences like that where there have been parties disrupted in all kinds of places, including rural areas, including areas that are in various cities around the United States. It's not just Chicago, it's not just New York, it's a variety of places that these things have happened. And that is why there is a push to get kids to do more. As a matter of fact, Dove, and I was going to bring that up later on, just recently launched their latest commercial. Has nothing to do with selling soap. It's the fact that 3 out of 5 of the women, children in general, have a mental health issue in all in that space. So they are talking about eating disorders and things along that space. And I do have a guest on. I got 2 guests on, and I'm going to bring one of them on because that's part of what she deals with is food addiction. So there is a major problem in society is what is going on in that space. And as I put in my LinkedIn post earlier today, just think if you were 22 or under, what you have gone through in your life or seen and everything. You saw 9/11. That would have been like when you were first born as an infant. You've been through a pandemic. You've been through various wars. You've been through various shootings. You've been through various protests of different sorts and everything. So I can see where the kids might be having some thoughts around that, and eating disorder has been a major problem around that. So I'm going to bring in Dr. Joan.
Mark, one question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The influence of social media on all these disorders.
Say what?
The influence of social media on these disorders. Are we seeing higher levels of mental disorders now because these kids are being exposed to social media than we were, let's say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
Oh, social media is definitely playing a role, and that's why I'm going to bring in Dr. Eiflin. She can answer better than I can, and that's part of why I think Dove launched its latest campaign. And I'm definitely going to bring in David as well. But I did want to bring in Dr. Eiflin, who is somebody that I had invited as well. Dr. Joan Eiflin, I don't know if you heard it, how much you heard it before you came.
Good morning, welcome.
But part of it was I was talking about civility, and I was so glad to get those items from my upstairs neighbor and everything. But I don't know that we're seeing as much civility as we used to, and a lot of people are using social media. And I know that you've been doing a lot of work in the space of food addiction and things in that space. So how much do you think that the social media is driving these conversations? Because I was really impressed with the Dove commercial when I saw it. I mean, most of the time corporations are selling their product, and that's what a corporation is supposed to do. But in this case, they took it upon themselves to bring awareness to an issue. And in this case, it was the issue of mental health among our kids, and particularly eating disorders in that space. But I just wondering your thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Processed foods have an enormous impact on mental health. They affect negatively every cell in the body. So, of course, that includes brain cells. We see a tremendous amount of research on the impact of processed foods on the brain. It's quite similar to drugs. So processed foods, as far as the brain is concerned, are drugs. They're not food. Whether it's sugar, gluten, flour, excessive salt, dairy, excessive fats, caffeine, food additives, our brains are being assaulted by these substances. Americans are eating 73% of their food in processed foods. They disrupt blood glucose. They promote excessive levels of adrenaline in the body. And they're having a huge impact on our behavior, our thinking, our mental health. 1.6 million Americans will die from diet-related diseases in 1 year. That's about 2.5 times more than the worst year of COVID. So this has a huge impact on behavior and, of course, mental health. And we just see the mental health deteriorating in our country. And it's just absolutely consistent with the idea that these processed foods are doing very specific things to our brains. And they're very similar to what happens when we use excessive drugs and alcohol.
Can I ask you a question, doctor? Should the government get involved and maybe stop these companies from selling these things that are so detrimental to us physically and mentally?
So think back to about 1940 and cigarettes. Cigarettes were killing people. It's the same business model. This all started when the tobacco industry came in and bought Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods in 3 short years, 1985 to 1988. And they brought their addiction business model. So in my background, I know it seems odd for a person working on food, but I have an MBA. I have an MBA from Stanford. Why? Why is that so valuable? Because this epidemic is driven by a business model, just like smoking was driven by a business model. 2/3 of American adults smoked at the height of smoking, and they were dying from emphysema and lung cancer. This is that model all over again. Now, except that processed foods is, I don't know, I made a rough estimate once. My undergraduate degree is in economics and political science. You think, oh my gosh, that's the weirdest background ever, but it all fits together. So I made an estimate. I think the processed food issue is about 10 times bigger than the tobacco issue. So you can imagine the influence of these corporations at the federal level and the state level. In smoking, they didn't start at the federal level. They started at the local level with non-smoking zones. This was the Robert Woods Foundation in the 1980s. They committed to stopping smoking. They started at the local level. I think, yes, I mean, our government is totally abdicating its role in protecting us from manipulative, addictive marketing and product formulation. And is that going to change? Absolutely not. These corporations are donating to these political campaigns, and that's not where I'm starting. I'm starting with individuals' awareness. I'm very grateful to be here. People have no idea that processed foods are causing these mental health issues, this really, really bad behavior, if you will. I like your word, civility. But yes, processed foods increase the level of adrenaline in the body, just like all drugs do, recreational drugs. And we're suffering from it as a result.
Do you think that there's any possibility that we could set up, just like there are no smoking zones, and kind of what Lee was talking about, some fast food free zones? Because it does seem like we live in a very, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else, probably even Lee and Dan, of going out and grabbing stuff from DoorDash or getting those quick orders, which sometimes are at those faster food institutions and all of that. So we do have very much of a fast food society because of our quick lifestyle and all in that space. And I'm actually going to bring in, because I think that it also plays into another part of the conversation, which is our fiscal health as well. So I'm going to bring in David just to share and everything.
So this is, you're right on the right target. It's so much more prevalent, of course, than tobacco. But it's not just fast food. Of course, it's all those categories: sugars, any kind of a concentrated sweetener, gluten, dairy, flour. It's all of those. So you could start with the schools, for example. You could get these toxic substances out of the schools. That would be a place where you could really get some traction, because we see the brain alterations in children. Obese children, one of the things that processed foods does to the brain is it hyperactivates the reward and stress centers and pulls the blood flow away from the frontal lobe. And you see obese children with smaller frontal lobes and these hyperactive centers in the rest of the brain. So all the frontal lobe activities, the learning, attention span, decision-making, problem solving, impulse control, memory, these are all epidemics in our culture today, and they're all explainable.
Well, David, one of the things that I know that we've been talking about, because I've reached out to you a couple of times on email and everything, and I know that one of the things that Nick and Kim are founders of this network talk about is fiscal literacy and the need for fiscal literacy. So it seems like we need a whole remodeling of the education system, including teaching around finances, because I do think that we waste a lot of money, including on the processed foods that Dr. Eflin is talking about as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts as to what we can do in that space, if you can share a little bit about your own background and what you're doing on the financial health side of things, because I think that health has to be conquered on all levels, whether that's our mental health, our physical health, which is part of what the food stuff that Dr. Eflin is talking about, or even our fiscal health, because a lot of us are living in that day-by-day kind of struggle in terms of finances. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what you're doing and how you got involved in it.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on the show, Mark. I've been listening here kind of in the background and listening to just a variety of different opinions here about this. I think it's actually kind of interesting. And I'd like to speak to something that Lee said earlier about going back to like protesting and breaking the law. And, if people are, damaging private property, then they're breaking the law. It's, end of story. The interesting things about that is I kind of have like my own story about that. When I was growing up still in high school, a bunch of buddies and I, we started our own underground school newspaper, totally against the rules. Basically broke every rule that you in the student handbook that you could imagine. And, and we had like an official school newspaper and everything, but we decided that the school newspaper was very PC, didn't really tell the truth, didn't really tell the whole story about everything that was going on in the school. So we were like, you know what, this is bogus. We're going to tell our own story. And we didn't have any authority. We didn't have any authorization to do this. So we had to kind of sneak around, use the school's resources and everything, and distribute it illicitly, of course, because you weren't allowed to distribute a school newspaper that was unauthorized. I mean, that was like the worst thing you could do. It broke into the computer lab. Back then, I went to school. Back then, it was like you had one place they had like they called it the Mac lab. It was like Macintosh computers was like one room in the whole school. It had all the computers, and that's where everything was done. And so eventually we got caught and kind of scolded and everything. But I think at the time what we were thinking was in retrospect, this was basically like a rejection of authority. And we were basically fighting against the established authority of the time. And that, in that context, it was the school. And I think that kind of plays into like what, when you're young, it's sort of like a rebel without a cause thing. Like you're revolting. You don't necessarily always know why. You just know that, here's the established authority. I'm rejecting that. As adults, things are a little bit different. You have to kind of go about that differently if you're going to do it. And, you can't just go out and if you're going to protest, you still have to be mindful that there are other people out there and you cannot just damage other people's property. That's just not how you do it. But I think it also speaks to an idea of personal responsibility. There is this aspect of, the way that people get into a lot of trouble in the first place is by blindly following and accepting authority. We're told what to do. We're told what to eat. We're told where to go to school and where to work and what degrees that we should get and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Some people go along with that to varying degrees. Like some people, they do everything that they're told to do. Most people, it's a mix. They kind of accept certain advice and authority and they reject others. And really, I think it's speaking to the issue of like eating processed foods too, and fiscal responsibility. All of that ultimately, in my experience, comes down to personal responsibility. I think as a society, we've gotten into a habit we've been taught from a very young age, and then also kind of grew up and habitualized this idea that that in some ways, blaming other people or other things for our own problems and not taking full responsibility for things that we do. And because it's so easy. It is much easier to blame other people. For example, it is much easier to blame something or someone else for not having enough retirement savings the government did this, my employer did that, circumstances of life. I came from a poor household. I wasn't able to do this and that and the other. And that's why I never made it in life. And all of those things, whether or not they're, and I'm not saying people don't have hardships. They do. A lot of people do. A lot of people grow up in households, middle class or lower middle class, where they don't have a lot, and they didn't go to like an Ivy League school, or they didn't have, quote unquote, lucky breaks or whatever. But that still doesn't absolve people of their own responsibility to take care of themselves. You still have to do it. It's like you get the cards that you're dealt in life, and that's what you have. You can't do anything about that. But that still doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of having to take care of yourself. And it's so much easier, though, just to say, I didn't get to where I was in life because of something else. Somebody did something to me or something. And at some point you do have to, I think the first step is, at some point you have to snap out of it, and you do have to say, I'm going to take responsibility for myself, and start there. That's where it starts.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Joan, you had a question?
I think all of that's quite true until you have been addicted without your consent, without your knowledge, without your agreement. You've been given a severe addiction and no treatment. And that's what we've got with processed foods today. It only takes about 6 months to addict a human to sugar or chocolate or a combination of sugar and fat. Mm-hmm. This is derived from animal studies, admittedly.
Sure.
And the processed food industry has been using its addiction business model on us for 35 years. I have done research showing that over 80% of Americans are very likely severely addicted. They meet 6 out of the 11 criteria for alcoholism addiction, as developed by the American Psychiatric Association, as reworded for food. And this is now, it's no longer a matter of, blaming the processed food industry for doing this. We have to accept that over 80% of Americans are walking around with these hyperactivated craving centers, hyperactivated stress centers that are pulling the blood supply away from the frontal lobe. There's where your braking system is, David. There's where all you're talking about personal responsibility. But when you have an addiction, that part of the brain is not getting blood flow. You need pretty immersive, intensive recovery, very specific addiction recovery programs in order to, I like your words, snap out of it. But this is an addiction that the tobacco / processed food companies have given even small children.
Sure. I mean, children have a harder battle because they're still learning how to self-regulate. They have low executive function, and they have sort of the cards stacked against them.
Now, on top of that, they're addicted.
Sure. As an adult, though, where else would it start if it's not starting with personal responsibility?
You have an addiction. We started talking earlier on about eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
We have research showing that people who are diagnosed with eating disorders, these are brain scan studies, have brains that are exhibiting the characteristics of addiction. So are eating disorders actually manifestations of processed food addiction? The evidence says yes, that's what's going on. And so when you try to treat an eating disorder with moderation, it's like saying to an alcoholic, oh, well, we'll treat that alcoholism with moderation. We've known since the 1930s, almost 100 years, the best way to treat alcoholism is through abstinence. So it's a dire situation out there, but I'm not blaming the processed food industry so that we could all just sit back and do nothing. I'm blaming the processed food industry so that we can focus treatment in the right direction. And we stop calling people lazy. We stop calling them irresponsible. They're not lazy. They're not irresponsible. They don't lack willpower. They have a hidden, severe addiction to processed food.
Should
Yeah, but they still have it. They
treatment
still
then?
are able to choose, right? I mean, they have the.
No, that's what addiction does. So the
They have to
origin of the
overcome
word.
the addiction to choose. but they still have the power of choice.
Sure.
That's-
Oh,
No, no,
absolutely.
no. That's exactly what an addiction takes away.
Oh
The
no,
No, I don't think
everybody
so.
has.
in the
I don't
frontal
think so.
lobe,
No,
I
no,
don't
and the
agree
blood
with that.
flow is going back to the
Oh,
reward
no,
system.
absolutely not. People always have the power to choose. That's always
Yeah.
something. Yes, they do.
That's
They
the
always have the
Addiction,
power to choose.
addiction
No,
does
or I
take
have
The
you
family
word
first.
addiction is
Yes,
to
I have family members
enslave.
who have been addicted to nicotine for the better part of their life. My mom was a smoker, a lifelong smoker, up until her, I think, mid 40s, and she had a health issue that sent her to the hospital and whatnot. And then, but it was in the hospital. And I had and I wasn't telling her what she should do. We were just talking about it and stuff like that. And the subject came up, and it was like, just like that, she snapped out of it. She stopped.
And you know what
that
she
was the
likely
last.
did?
That was the last day. She got she didn't go to any meetings.
Any
She didn't go to
treatment.
any special. She didn't.
She
was
very
addicted.
likely-
Now, nicotine is one of the most addictive substances
Yes, you're absolutely
in
right.
the world. And
She very
just
likely
stopped
transferred
cold
the addiction
turkey.
to processed foods. She
Yes.
very likely did not get rid of
Excuse me.
addiction. She very likely transferred it to processed foods. Drug
no,
and alcohol treatment
no, she-
today,
excuse
they're
me.
not really treating the addiction. They're
Yeah,
just
excuse me. No,
transferring
she
it to
didn't.
processed foods.
Excuse me. No, she didn't. Because she also ended up not when she quit cold turkey on the cigarettes. She got rid of that, and she also started walking daily. She got like some exercise thing, and then she started walking also, and then she switched to the Atkins diet, and she started getting off of all of this stuff and high protein diets and watched the sugar, eliminated all the processed food stuff and all the garbage that was in the house and everything. So that was like it was like a life change, but it was a self-initiated choice.
It's very rare. David, that's
I've seen other people. But I've seen other people do that too.
93% of Americans.
My mom is a great example of that. I think that's like
it's a very rare example. 93% of Americans, 93, now have high triglycerides, high cholesterol,
sure they do.
high blood pressure, high blood glucose, or a high waist to hip ratio.
They do. And
So
most
your mom
people-
was lucky, but 93% of
It had
Americans
nothing
are
to do.
not.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. It had nothing to do with luck. She made a choice, and I think taking that away from somebody,
It's rare,
undercuts people's-
David.
Excuse me.
If that was
Excuse me,
so
ma'am.
easy, why do 93% of Americans have
Excuse me.
a
Can I finish,
diet-related
please?
disease?
Hold on a second.
Why don't 93% of Americans just make a decision?
Let's hear from
Because
David
they're
really
addicted.
quickly.
It's because most people are lazy. Most people don't want to do the hard
No,
work.
oh my gosh, that is so cruel. You
I know
just
myself. Myself, I'm talking about.
psychologically abuse
That's so
93% of Americans.
So
David,
Why don't most
oh
people
my gosh,
exercise?
I
Why don't they
apologize
exercise
for
and
your
diet?
behalf.
Why don't diets work? Why don't exercise programs work? Why do
Look at the
people buy
research.
exercise equipment and then they don't use it?
It's because they are addicted. And you guys are making a classic mistake. This is why people, when they come into our programs, are also traumatized.
Can we define the
Because
word addicted?
people are saying
addiction?
these kinds of things about them, and they're missing the addiction, and they're not treating the addiction. So instead of treating the addiction, which is a long-term, deep commitment, right programs,
Right.
would you say, oh,
Granted.
well, they failed because they're lazy?
I
That's
never said
cool.
it's easy.
No.
Can we
Cruel.
define the word addiction
Yeah,
versus habituation?
Yeah.
No. This is addiction. You
And
can't
how would
gloss
you
it
define
over.
addiction?
You can't minimize it. The research is very, very clear. The brains of obese people are being altered. Now, I'm going to say altered instead of damaged because this is reversible in the same way as cocaine addicted people. If I could share a screen, I could show you the research.
Can I just give my definition and you can correct me, please? An habituation is something that you do, whether you ingest something or not, and the body craves it, whether it's processed foods, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes. And if you take that away, it's very hard on the body, but it's possible to do. An addiction is when you take it away, you will do things that a sane person will not do. You will steal, you will murder. That's where cocaine and certain drugs are very dangerous because you lose your sense of civility if you want to use it. Your sense of, you'll kill your mother for these drugs. But you take someone's cigarettes away, it's very hard, the withdrawals, granted, but you're not going to kill your mother for them. You're not going to rob the store for them. Am I wrong?
So addictions are very carefully defined. The American Psychiatric Association has spent 50 years in intense debate to come up with 11 criteria. And people who are overeating meet 6. 80% of Americans meet 6 of those, which is the threshold for a severe addiction. They didn't ask for it. There is an addiction business model. There is an addiction process. The tobacco companies, when they came into processed foods, they took the Marlboro Country Store and they made it into the Kool-Aid Wacky Warehouse. So they very deliberately went after children with sugar. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine. We have good evidence for that. And this is not because we're friggin' lazy or lack willpower. We've been given a hidden addiction. Our government has stood by and let this happen. It created a lot of jobs. And now we're being psychologically abused by being accused of being lazy or lacking willpower or not wanting it bad enough. No, you treat a severe addiction in very, very specific ways. And people are not getting that treatment.
But it all comes down to whether. So let's assume for a moment. Let's assume for a moment that people need to have a specific program to come in. They have to make the choice to come in. They have to choose to come to get some. I'm not even agreeing that
know about it in the first place.
Dr. Joan, I'm sorry. I respect your opinion and everything, but can I have a chance to say my piece here?
I'm going to object if you psychologically abuse.
Oh God.
All right. So, and this applies to, I think, like all things in life, whether it's finance, which I happen to know very well, and
completely different dynamic.
Okay. So, all right. So
you look at the brain of somebody who's been eating 73% of their food and processed
people
foods.
ultimately have to make a
what other
choice
brains
to
are
come
doing.
and get treatment or to make different choices, to make a change in their life. It all has to start with them deciding that they're going to do it. So like nobody can come and like reach into a person's brain and say like, I'm going to, like a puppet master, I'm going to manipulate their brain and do this for them and do this. Even if they need some sort of help. And I mean, I'll concede the fact that like people who are addicted to hardcore drugs, if it's something where they need to go to a hospital to take another drug or something to kind of wean themselves off of whatever they're on. And I've known people who've been on very powerful painkillers and you have to wean them off of them because you can't just stop it because it causes a violent reaction in their body. But ultimately they choose to start that. Like they have to decide, they have to say like, oh, you know what, there's a problem here. I need to do something about it. And I need help doing this. But they ultimately are the ones who initiate. It's always self-initiated.
So if
nobody
you're food
comes
addicted,
to somebody and says, I'm going to force you to stop doing this. And I'm going to reach in, I'm going to manipulate your mind. The people choose to come in. They choose to go on diet, whether they're going to a doctor and get help. They choose also in the realm of finance, they have to choose that too. So, and when they're managing, when people are in debt and they have to ultimately make that choice to stop spending money, start saving money.
Okay. Millions of Americans do make the choice to get help.
Self-initiated choices. They're
they go to a weight loss program, which makes the addiction worse. Or they go to an eating disorders program, which makes the addiction worse. They go to residential treatment, which makes the processed food addiction worse. They go to their doctor, they get a weight loss drug, which can make food addiction worse and has terrible side effects. These people are trying. They are being told things about weight loss and about eating disorders that make processed food addiction worse. I will not let you blame these people for not trying. We spend tens of billions of dollars on these
nobody's
programs.
blaming Nobody is blaming anybody. That doesn't help to blame somebody, but it doesn't help.
Oh no, I hear you. You say, "Oh, well, they have a choice. They have a choice." You are blaming them, and that is not fair.
That's not true at all. Excuse me. That is not true at all. That is. Yeah,
I just heard you say that. I'm blaming. They have a choice. They have a choice. They could make a choice. They could get help. No, but when they reach out to get help, they get help that makes them sicker.
They do have a choice, and that is not psychologically abusing them, and it is intellectually dishonest to say that.
No, if you have an addiction, that is the definition of addiction. It has taken away your choice.
Nothing takes away a person's choice, because otherwise they wouldn't come into your clinic. Elsewise, they wouldn't come into your clinic.
Okay, well, that's just because you don't know what an addiction is. I'll agree.
Okay. So how did they get to the clinic? Dr. Joan, how did they get to your clinic? Are they referred, or how does that happen?
Do you
We're
beam
out
them
there
in on
advertising. We're out there advertising. If you ask most people what is food addiction, they will deny that it even exists. I wrote the textbook, 2,000 studies. They will deny it exists because it's profitable to deny it exists.
So when
the
you
amount of
advertise,
disinformation out there about food addiction is just, it's an ocean.
so when you advertise, how do they get into your clinic? When you advertise, when you send out these how do you contact them? How do they get there?
We offer a free workshop. They register for a free workshop. They get
But
on
how
our
do they
email
do that?
list.
What I mean, how do they do that? Because if they're not in control of their own body and their choices, how do they do that? How do they come in? How do they make that decision? Do you make it for them?
We educate them. It's a long process.
But how is it that they, when you're contacting somebody,
Because
how
they
is it
see
that
an
they do that?
advertisement.
And they choose to come in. They choose to respond.
They click on a link.
Yeah, and choose to respond. Yep.
They've got to choose to respond and everything. The question I had for everybody here, and they actually very vibrant discussion, everything is, and it comes to something that Lee said earlier, which is that some of the folks that are committing crimes are not necessarily committing them, that they're committing them like maybe under a drug-induced kind of thing or something along those lines. But I can't say that because there are folks that have literally robbed stores to get a candy bar or something else that it might be part of that process industry and all in that space. So that being said, how much are we needing to re-educate people in general, just about everything from the finances to the whole system of foods? Because I remember when I went to school, there was the whole notion of, you need to have your various food categories, food
groups, yeah.
And all of those different food groups. I don't even know if we're teaching that, and some of those food groups are not being. I mean, you just mentioned that there's processed food within dairy, and I remember dairy was one of those food groups that they talked about even during that time and everything.
But candy bars are not in the food pyramid.
No, they're not in the food pyramid.
But they should be.
They are at the very
They
tip.
should be.
There's a
At the
little
very
bit of
tip.
sugar. But you talk about committing crimes for drugs. Almost every food addicted, sugar addicted child will talk about stealing food from the kitchen, stealing money out of their mom's purse, stealing to get their sugar. This is very demoralizing at a very young age. So yes,
But as an adult won't do that though. Why are certain adults more
steal, oh yes, they'll go into the
for a Pepsi or a scoop of ice cream? They'll steal.
They will go into the kitchen and they will sneak. They'll sneak food. They will sneak. It's dishonest. They'll hide the whatever in the laundry room and then wait for the family to go to bed so that they can eat their drug of choice.
Why are certain people more prone to addiction than others for the same thing? When it comes to cocaine, I think there's a universal addiction that people can get addicted to. But when it comes to sugar foods or cakes or cookies or processed foods, why are some people prone to addiction and some people not?
It's a number of factors. This is a very complex addiction. It has a lot of moving parts. It depends on how much cueing they've been exposed to. It depends on how young they were when they started. It depends on how much they've actually ingested, how much was available to them, how much got into their system. This is Pavlovian conditioning of dopamine and serotonin and opioid and cannabinoid reward systems. And it's one of the reasons why this is such a hard addiction to recover from. It's not like you have alcoholism, and as you come off the alcohol, you can depend on your other reward systems to feel good. This is it's just devastating. So
Isn't that a little demeaning to people?
Joe,
Isn't that a little demeaning to people to tell them that they're addicted? They don't have really a choice.
It's liberating. Once you have the right answer, you can get the right treatment and you can get free. This is the origin of the word addiction, is to enslave. It's a word that was created in Greek or Roman times when a man, to settle a debt, would sell himself into slavery. That's the word addiction. That's where that comes from. This is it's a mental enslavement.
Dr. Jones, just really quickly, and by the way, we've got Nick, who's one of the founders of the network, on as well. He may have some thoughts for you also, and definitely, I know that he definitely has some thoughts for you, David, because he's very much into that notion of fiscal literacy and the fact that our schools need to do a better job of teaching that and everything. But I was wondering, do you sometimes feel when you're doing all this work, and I definitely saw the book and saw some of the other works, that if I can just use a fairy tale kind of analogy, that you're tilting at windmills because it is so ingrained in our society. I mean, it is a fast food society that we live in. It is very much ingrained in our television. You can't turn on television without seeing a processed food commercial and everything
Right.
in that space. So I was wondering, do you sometimes get that tilting at windmill kind
You know,
of feeling?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. I love the story of there's been some kind of event at sea, and all the starfish are washed up on the beach. And there's a little girl walking down the beach, throwing them back into the ocean as the sun comes up, one by one by one. And a man approaches her and says, "Isn't that futile? That you look at all the rest of them that aren't going to be thrown back." And she picks up a starfish, throws it back in the water, and she says, "It wasn't futile for that one." So we're doing this one by one by one. I've invested all my own personal money in this. So with the person who came into our program yesterday, it wasn't futile for her. And you know what, Mike, you're here for all the people who are listening today who have never heard of processed food addiction and have been given this psychological abuse. Oh, you're just lazy. Oh, you don't want it enough. Oh, you could if you wanted to. You are saving lives out there, and I'm so grateful to you. Even just getting the phrase processed food addiction. Oh, I have an addiction? Oh, is that the problem? Okay, well, now what do I do about it? You can't choose a treatment program if you don't have the right diagnosis.
And along those same lines, and this I'm going to toss to both David and Nick. I mean, yeah, David and Nick as well. But we had the pleasure on one of our other shows yesterday of having it's actually Real Girls Rock, but she had a woman on that is a devotee of definitely the whole network marketing space and all in that line. She is actually one of the leading network marketers. And I remember she was talking about Grant Cardone, and Grant Cardone had basically asked her, and we know him from the social media spaces, after she had asked why there were no African Americans at this big telemarketing plan meeting that they were having, one of those great business, getting involved in business kind of meetings. And he got everybody in the different ethnicities to hoop and holler. And then when they got around the African Americans, there was her and her friend that were there. And then he basically turned around and said, well, then next time you need to bring your friends. And she had made it her mission that she was going to get involved in this business. So she literally went to his business, even though she was not invited. Come back to your not invited story, David, and everything. And she had the meeting with Grant, and basically Grant was like telling her that she was going to buy this big building, a Trump-like building and everything. And she's and y'all can go back and watch the Real Girls Rock show to hear this story much better in the way she told it. She does get a little rough with her language and everything, and has some harsh words that are slang oriented. I'll just put it that way and everything. But she basically said, give me about a day or two. And this was a woman that was poor, single mother, definitely was perceived poor and all in that space. And she came back, and the building he was going to buy, she raised the money she needed and helped buy that building. So she now owns the building that she is in and all in that space. So if you go back and watch that story, you'll see that was a powerful story that existed. So I was wondering, David and Nick, is that something we need to do more of, is get more people to find their resources, whatever their resources are, and go into some of these real estate opportunities, like you've heard of, like real estate buy-in clubs and everything. But I was wondering your thoughts around that, David, and maybe Nick's got some thoughts too.
Real estate's a whole different cat, but I like what Dr. Jones saying about processed food addiction. Okay, let's clarify that further. Processed food addiction in the United States of America, because I was in Spain and Morocco. Guess what? I ate at one McDonald's only because it was the only thing available in that particular area. But other than that, you avoid McDonald's. Actually, I have McDonald's over there. I think it's really great. We exported our obesity problem overseas.
Yes.
But a lot of places overseas avoid it like crazy. In the
Mhm.
United States of America, 40% of the people in America are obese.
Are
Okay.
obese.
That is not a good,
83% are obese or overweight.
yeah, they're obese or overweight. That is not a good stat.
83%.
And it's because if you go down any street here, it's processed food after fat food.
And it's not because they're lazy or they're
No,
weak-willed
because it
or they
is
don't
addictive.
want it. That didn't
It's
happen to 83% of people.
But
That's why they-
Thank
hold on
you.
a
That's-
second. Hold on a
That's
second.
why
I
they
gotta
call
ask-
it a happy meal.
For you.
No, hold on a second. I
A
got to ask
happy
you a question.
meal,
though.
yeah.
Happy meal, yeah.
I got to ask you a question.
creating
This is for both
healthcare
you and
problems
David.
here in this
Hold
country.
on a second. I know
Okay?
we're winding
The
down. We
reason
got
our
another
healthcare is
10,
out of
15
control
minutes.
is because, frankly, everybody's fat because they're eating all the garbage food that's sitting out there. And
They're
that's-
fat because they're addicted. The same
Yeah,
way
But,
that we
hold on a
smoke.
second. I do have a question for David and for everybody else and everything.
Yeah.
But my
I'm on
question
a
is,
big
isn't part of the
bloody
problem
Mac
also
right now
the
after
food
this
deserts? Because food
conversation,
deserts
buddy.
usually
Give me
exist
a big
in
Mac.
our poorer communities.
pounder.
Exactly. That's exactly
Definitely,
right.
it did not
That's
make
exactly
sense.
right.
Lettuce.
Look where the food deserts
Where's
are.
my
So,
quarter
David,
pounder?
what is your thoughts? Because that's
Quarter
a
pounder
financial
is
issue.
gonna put
Where
on
the
a
food
quarter
deserts
pounder.
are.
I couldn't hear the
I'm
question
on a
because over the other show. Could you repeat that, please?
Now, the question I was asking, because Nick kind of brought it up in that space, is part of what's going on is also an economic concern, because a lot of this food obesity is taking place in what are called food deserts. So a lot of the convenience stores, a lot of the McDonald's are done in intentional locations, usually in poor areas where they really can't afford to fill some of this
Exactly. It's the
high-priced
same
food.
pattern as tobacco.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. It's just great being in
There's
Spain.
a sucker born every minute.
Yeah, and they're
And
all
processed food
Americans.
addiction is
And-
financially devastating, just like every other addiction.
Hey, if you go to Italy and Spain, the people are all thin. You want to see which one's an American? Go look at the fat person. That's the
Chow.
American street. That's the
Yeah.
reality of our situation here.
Yep.
And with a 40% overweight obesity problem, it's a major issue. But the media doesn't want to talk about it, because the next thing they're going to do is they're going to run a Burger King commercial.
Well, no, because that's they derive
I'm missing something.
revenue from processed foods, weight
mean,
loss,
a KFC commercial.
pharmaceuticals.
KFC
It's
commercial.
83%, Nick. Nick,
Yeah.
it's 83% of Americans are overweight or obese. 83,
And I'm
and they're
one
not
of
all lazy.
to that stuff. I have to stay away from. I have to.
Doctor,
This
Doctor, for those of us who are not going to come in and get professional treatment, do you have any suggestions that we can take away?
treatment. My wife
Go
says
to processedfoodaddiction.com.
Yeah.
Sign up for the free material. We've got tons of free material out there. Get educated. Get
Mhm.
educated. Start to understand what happened to you. What did
Yeah.
these tobacco/processed food companies do to us as
But sugar
and our children as when we were children? What did they do to us when we were children?
Oh, they got you.
Is this
They put
something the schools
sugar
can do a
on
better
our
job in
babies.
education?
And Nick,
Yes,
wasn't
it
one-
really apparent. The best thing to do is get it out of your house. Go to processedfoodaddiction.com, get the free material, start to identify what you need to get out of your house. If you are attracted to fast food, find a different way to drive. This is triggering, cueing, stimulation,
Yeah.
and that's where the overeating starts.
There's a frosted mini wheat for you there, right there, buddy.
No, it's
Right?
just it's revolting.
Sugar.
Yeah,
One more
and
question. I'm
market
sorry.
it to
I
children.
gotta have my sugar fix.
Doctor, one more question. I'm sorry. You
I
mentioned
like
sugars
frosted
before.
mini-wheat.
Is there an advantage of honey versus sugar?
No, not at this point.
Mm.
So when you have these highly sensitized reward centers, they will
Right.
react, they will flood the brain with cravings, and you're not choosing that. That's
Yeah.
that's a
Nick,
programmed that's been programmed by these neurologists. The food industry hires neurologists. They
Yeah.
hire scientists to make their products addictive.
It's all
They
related.
have their own MRI equipment. They can look and see exactly what combination of advertising and product formulation will stimulate the greatest release of cravings in the brain. This is not fragrant.
There used to be a television commercial for potato chips, Lay's. Bet you can't eat just one.
Yes, they flaunt it. Oh,
Okay.
but you can't
Yeah.
just eat one. Well, that's one of the criteria for an addiction.
Yeah, they don't want you to eat just one. They want you to eat
You know, I
lots.
picked up a product in the store. It said cravings, warning, and then, I mean, they just flaunt it brazenly.
Because
Because
part of
there's
it, what
nobody
you just
pushing
said
back.
earlier, though, is
Like the
the
Democrats.
association
Because
between the
media's-
cigarette industry and
media's not
the
gonna push back because
sugar
they're
and the
on
candy industry,
payroll,
because
hello?
RJR
Media is
Nabisco
on
was
the
a merger
payroll
between those two.
for these addictive foods. The media will not push back. And as we've done in our media show, 5 companies own 90% of all the media in the United States. It used to be.
Well, that's because they like the people enslaved.
No, well, yeah. Well, they like the money. Come on, Dan. We wouldn't be having this conversation if McDonald's was saying we're going to be showing a commercial right after your conversation. See, we don't have McDonald's as a sponsor, or Burger King, or KFC, or all those garbage. But if you did, they influence what we're having, and we say, Dr. Jones, we really love you, but we can't have you on our television because
That's right.
Is coming
That's
up right now.
That's right. So, I'll go get a fake McRib.
What?
A fake McRib.
Yeah, a fake
McRib. Oh yeah.
But she's absolutely correct. It's addictive. It creates big problems in our healthcare system because we have this 40% obesity rate in the United States.
83% overweight and obese.
Dr. Jones, isn't that part of the problem too? What Dan just said, because it is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that some of the foods that are perceived to be better for us have some of this process issues as well.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like the tofu burger, and some of those are also very much processed also.
Here's the irony: is the diet products are addictive. So these, like the Slim Fast and the diet bars. Atkins had his bars manufactured in Canada because in Canada you don't have to put glycerin on the label as a sugar. So these processed foods are now being labeled as diet products. And you're right, there are a few lawyers pushing back. For example, I'm not going to name the product, but there's a healthy bar that is 30% high fructose corn syrup. And so this lawyer took it on, and now that company can no longer put the word healthy on that. Can I go back to something? I would like to talk about the racist aspects of this. Mark, you brought up the racist aspects of the marketing conference. So just like cigarettes, the processed food industry preys on underserved neighborhoods. So no, they don't want a nice family restaurant in an underserved neighborhood. They want their fast food restaurants there. This is also oppressive because when somebody has become addicted, they are now tired, they're craving, they don't have use of their brains. So we see that the obesity rates in African American and Hispanic populations are disproportionately high. Now, different issues exist in the Caucasian populations like depression, but this is highly racist. This is highly oppressive because once you're sick from it, once you've gone on and developed diabetes or heart disease or high blood pressure, once you've had a stroke, once your feet are being removed because they won't treat you with a diet solution, then you're disabled. And so disability rates among younger and younger people are rising. So this is very racist.
Yeah.
But is it misogynistic? That's what I want to know.
Well, initially they went after women more than men, but now they've caught up with the men.
Yeah.
It's now the obesity rates between men and women are quite similar.
We'll see how it treats the transgendered people. Is it differently? No, I gotta cover all the bases here.
No, so transgendered people are more stressed because of cultural pushback. And so they suffer disproportionately well. Stress is one of the things that will trigger an addiction.
Right.
Yep. It's everywhere.
Right.
Well, maybe you ought to get Dallin Mulvaney to promote your program.
Who?
I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
The guy from Bud Light.
Bud Light
was on the
There you go.
beer commercial and everything in that space.
You remember the guy who promoted cigarettes, the actor? I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he was the Marlboro guy.
Marlboro Man.
Yeah, he
was
died.
always
There's a few of them.
cancer.
Few of them, yeah.
And at the end of his career, he went around and apologized. And then he died from the consequences of
That's
cigarette.
what I heard. Yeah.
I think all of these people who promote, particularly the soft drinks, the celebrities who are promoting the soft drinks, which is kind of like the crack cocaine of the processed food world, I think they're going to regret it. I hope that they will regret it at some point.
Yeah.
And then you see McDonald's doing things like taking, what is that singer, Travis somebody. And then there's the Travis so-and-so meal at McDonald's. So they have very specific focus campaigns to lure children into fast food places. We have the internal documents. When tobacco transferred their addiction technology over to sugar for children, we have the internal documents bragging about how they're going to take the Marlboro Country Store and recreate it as the Kool-Aid Wacky Warehouse. This was very deliberate. I gave a talk once on this topic, and a man came up to me afterwards. He's been on TV. I'm not giving away his name, but he said he was director of research for one of these big companies for 2 years. He had 3 scientists on his staff whose explicit job, full-time job, was to make that company's products addictive. This is real. There are real people doing this. We know, for example,
criminal. That's criminal.
Of course it's criminal. Of course it's criminal. I hope I live long enough to see this get to the courts. It will make the tobacco litigation look like, sorry for the pun, but look like peanuts.
But how's that going to happen when you go down Main Street America and there's the Arby's, the McDonald's, the KFC?
It's a huge ocean.
There's some streets that just full.
But we do know what to do from the tobacco experience. For example, in Chile, they now have a warning label. They have a system where if there's too much sugar, fat, or salt in the product, it says so right on top of the product. Huge impact. 25% reduction in soft drink sales in 1 year.
Right.
So we know what to do. But the federal level, just like with tobacco, the federal level is paralyzed by campaign contributions, state level paralyzed. Where did we start with tobacco?
And the media is paralyzed. Let's add the media. The media is paralyzed because they're on the payroll. Okay. The reality is the media does not want to talk to you, don't want to listen to what you're saying. Your story is wonderful, but mainstream media could care less because next they're going to be running a KFC commercial.
They're actively distorting it.
Exactly.
And this is why we're so grateful to people like Mark. Yay, Mark.
We're different.
We're definitely different in everything. David, just really quickly, I know we're going a little bit over, but that's okay and everything. If you just share a little bit about what you're doing on the financial lane and everything as we get ready to head out the door, because like I said, I did know that is a topic that is very much of interest to Nick and other people that are on the network. So I do think that is something we need to have conversations about as well, which is our lack of financial knowledge and all of that.
Sure, absolutely. I know you're talking about a lot about the food, and maybe this is probably like a heretical thing to say at this point. But what I do is actually teach people how to be more financially secure, make better financial decisions for themselves. And really, ironically, as a guy who works in finance, not taking that position of I'm going to tell you what to do and micromanage your money for you, more so providing more education on how to not what to do, but more so like how to think. In other words, how to make your own decisions, make better financial decisions for yourself. And that comes through a systematic process. And it is a systematic process to learn how to make better financial decisions. It's not something that we were taught as most people weren't taught as children. And really, like I can remember in high school, I think the most we ever got into finance stuff was learning how to write checks, get a checkbook and like practice making. This is back when people still wrote checks, if that dates me. Now everybody's like click on an app. You could buy refrigerators and TVs on Amazon now, apparently.
So, what's a check?
But like an actual physical paper check that you practice writing out what to put in the memo line and how to write the dollars and cents and everything. So, but now it's a different story as far as like how to make it's more. All of that stuff. There's nothing, by the way, nothing wrong with that, the mechanical stuff. But a lot of it is a lot of what is being taught today is it's more of on the technical side, mechanical side of budgeting. Do this specific budgeting method. It's very tactical. There aren't a lot of people teaching principles and strategy and kind of like the bigger picture stuff of not like the old phrase of, if you catch a fish for a man, you can feed him for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, then he can feed himself for a lifetime. That's more of, if you can get to that higher level of, hey, if I just learn how to fish, then I'm not going to be reliant on other people for my own financial security. And that's really where it's at. So that's, I think, where the whole financial industry is really kind of stuck in that position of, we're going to do things for you. We're going to provide solutions and so on and so forth. And then eventually at some point, I think that there's going to be a shift towards people wanting to do more things for themselves. Not necessarily, there's always going to be a need for financial products and a certain kind of financial intermediaries. But I think that the more that we can move towards, getting people to make their own financial choices, their own financial decisions, and making better financial decisions for themselves. That's a very individualized process. And it's based on people's value systems. So somebody is going to value something. One thing, you take anything in life, like whether or not you should be going on vacation somewhere. That vacation is going to be more valuable to some people than it is to somebody else. Running shoes, just pick any product out in the marketplace. You ask two people and they're going to give you two different answers as to how important it is to them. So knowing how to make decisions like, should I replace the refrigerator, or should I, just repair it and then see how long it goes so I can put that money towards something else? Or, should I buy a new car or fix up the one I have? Or should I, contribute money to my 401k, or should I buy some other investment or something? Those are the kinds of decisions that people need to learn more of how to do themselves, because nobody's really teaching them how to do that. It's more of, you go to a financial planner a lot of times and it's like they sit down and make a plan, an investment plan for retirement, but that is not most of the financial decisions people make. And then also, just, I think when it comes to those types of even retirement decisions, people need to learn how to make more of those decisions for themselves. Even if they still need help, actually getting into an investment, they still need to be able to make the choices of, should I do this versus this other thing? And that's a big part of what I do.
Hey, David, along those same lines, and like I said, just a quick question for you and everything.
Sure.
And it's something that Lee's brought up on the show before, and all in that space. How much are we allowing folks to spend way beyond their means? I know that I've heard this saying somewhere like 30 to 35% you should not be spending on your rent, but I do know a number of people that were spending more than that. We know that there are tons of folks that are, I've got some very basic sneakers, but we do know there are a lot of those kids that are going out and still getting Jordans, even though, as I just learned last night on a friend's podcast.
Mark, are they paying for them?
They don't even know who Jordan is past the brand, so they don't even know who Jordan is, but they know
sneakerheads, right? They got like shelves full of sneakers,
right?
Yeah,
but they're spending that, and then we got people that are spending thousands of dollars to go see, and I'm not knocking the singer because I actually like the singer, but they're going to go see Beyonce or some of these other celebrities and all in that space. So how much of what you're doing is teaching them about some of those, because it does seem like a lot of folks are overspending. Some things are necessities and some things are not necessities at all.
Yeah. So all of that comes down to, first of all, making a financial plan for yourself, sorting out where your priorities are. And then after you've kind of sorted out where your priorities are, then you can start budgeting and making, financial plans for how you're going to fund the different things that you want to do in life. So is it wrong for somebody to spend 30% of their income on, housing? That some of that depends on, what you're doing in your house, right? So if you have, and just take a kind of an off the wall, because not off the wall these days, but a lot more people are working from home these days, right? Remote work is exploding. Right. So if you're spending maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago, what may have seemed, in an inordinate amount of money going towards housing may actually be normal today, because your house is not just your house anymore. Your house is where you live, but it's also You have like an office in your home. You've bought a bigger house, or you renting a bigger place because you have like an extra room. So you're paying more because more of that is going towards support, your work at home business or lifestyle or whatever. So some of those decisions and more, it's driven by your values, your personal circumstance, what you need, and what you need is not necessarily dictated by some external force. It's dictated by your own personal values and future financial goals.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely appreciate that. Like I said, winding down, I've definitely greatly appreciate having both of you on. Hope to get both of you on again in the not too distant future to share more of your stories around financial literacy and also around the processed food fight and all in that space. But one thing I was going to get both of you to do as we get ready to head out the door and get to some of our other programming on the network is if you can tell folks how they can reach you and where you're located at and some of the other thoughts that you may want to share just in partying and everything. So I'll save the lady for last, but I'll start with you, David, and then go to Joan, and then
I was going to say ladies first.
Okay.
Or maybe that's misogynistic. I don't know.
All right, we'll go ladies first.
Yeah. All right. So processedfoodaddiction.com. Just sign up for the free stuff. You'll get the right information. Processedfoodaddiction.com. There's a self-quiz there with the 11 signs of processed food addiction so that you can see for yourself what you've been given.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. David, yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my website is monegenics.com, MONEGENIX.com. And my business is focused on life insurance, budgeting, and basic financial planning to build a foundation so that anyone can learn how to, and actually not just learn how to, but actually start the process of building financial security for themselves.
Thank you.
Well, greatly appreciate it.
David, I want to say how much I am grateful for what you're doing. Processed food addiction is financially devastating. We have a whole module in our community about financial management. People don't have that skill. So I just want to say how grateful I am to you for working on this.
Thanks.
Definitely appreciate it here as well. By the way, those who are watching, I think it's processed food with an E in between the S and the D. So I did see that they were trying to get that across and all of that. So it should be processed with the E, with the extra E in there, just in case folks are watching that.
No S. It's processed food addiction.
All right, so we got it correct. Processedfoodaddiction.com and all in that space. So definitely greatly appreciated. And like I said, we saw Nick Palveda, who was here earlier. And in the background, we've also got Kim Calhoun, who is actually one of the other founders of the network as well. And like they said, these are topics that aren't discussed enough and all in that space. So we're definitely looking forward to having more folks out and all in that way, and we are definitely looking forward to having some more great shows on this particular day, Wednesday. As a matter of fact, I know we've got Follow the Brand, which is a show about branding that'll be coming your way at 7 o'clock, and we've got a show around the metaverse coming at 6 also. So there are a number of things that are going to be taking place. Oh, and we got Modern Investing with Sasha, who sometimes comes on our news show, but he's probably getting ready for that show that'll be coming our way at 1 o'clock on this particular afternoon. So we got plenty of great programming coming your way, and we're looking forward to catching it on podtv.tv. So be sure to tell your friends about this powerful network and the great things that we are doing as well. And of course, we've got a future presidential candidate because Lee Rhodes is here, and of course, he's running for
president. You never know. Thank you for the plug.
No problem.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Y'all have a good day. Thank you.